Welcome home to Passionate Justice 79 live on our terrific Starcom radio network. Real feelings, real personalities. Passionate Justice embedded in the Starcom radio network, anchored by the brilliant talk radio pioneer Ed Till. Weekdays, weekends, that man's on fire. You've heard him. It's as if the man's on 24/7. So, connect with us. Yes, connect with us at www.starcomradionetwork.com. And, of course, on Facebook, on Starcom Radio Network. Real feelings, real personalities. We broadcast real characters. I know you enjoy Passionate Justice on Starcom Radio Network, so let me know how you hear me. Tell me at Starcom Radio Network's Facebook page, and I want you to like that page. Let me know how you're hearing me today. Thank you all of you, for your continuing support, and reach out to me also on Twitter at jwolf41387 for all Passionate Justice news, releases, podcasts. I ask all of you, follow the show again at jwolf41387 on Twitter. It's now yet another great way to connect with the Starcom Radio Network. Now a new hour, personal notes, super guest writers spurring you on every week, every day, a challenge to create what? A little more justice in our world. And I do want you to join our salon, the very best readers and writers site on the net. They help us and we're helping them, growing, hosted by Lori Wright of California, and it's free. Join now at www.oursalon.ning.com. You know I am author, activist Jonathan Wolfman, and the spark for these stories comes from Passionate Justice, a progressive memoir and essays. 2013 I wrote it. It's available at Amazon, and I am very proud to say that underwriting for Passionate Justice in 2015 comes from my old colleague, great guy, Bud Clayman, and OC87 Productions, producers of OC87 RecoveryDiaries.com and the feature-length film OC87, the obsessive-compulsive major depression bipolar Asperger's movie. I want you right now. Check out OC87 RecoveryDiaries.com first. To our now wandering pal, Don Draper, who, yes, he leaves us too soon. Just gave his caddy to a teen thief. He sees himself in that kid? Oh, I don't know. But Don, now sitting by the side of that road, Neo Jack Kerouac on the road. We gonna see Don back in a Manhattan madman's world, or just fading out, thumbing down that dusty Midwest road as his saga ends? So to you, Don, to you, let me serenade you, man, with your words at the Stones concert. Tide, 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 it's on my side. Yes, it is. All right. So, leading today, you know, I've told you forever that anti-abortion radicals would never be satisfied simply shutting abortion down. That was the most unambitious of their aims, and I have told you that over and again, because for them, personal freedom for men, yeah, that's divine. But so is shoving women all over the show. And I have told you over and again that they'd fast go after contraception again, subverting the court's 1965 ruling in Griswold v. Connecticut, and punish women for using contraception. And we've seen that more and more. Now, here, near where I speak to you from right now, anti-abortion groups promise to ignore a new D.C. law and fire women, cashier women, for using birth control no matter what the law says. Now, you need to read the full article in Raw Story by Joan Ships, but essentially here's what she tells us. Anti-abortion groups in Washington, D.C. are dedicated to and promise to break a law. That's right. They promise to break a law that prohibits organizations from discriminating against women based on their reproductive health choices. See, look, last week, the Reproductive Health Non-Discrimination Amendment Act of last year, it's known as RHNDA, it went into effect in D.C., making it illegal for employers in the nation's capital to what? To fire people for using birth control. But these organizations are undeterred, of course. Well, of course, because religious loons never give a damn for civil law. A group of so-called pro-life organizations released a statement reserving their right to fire people for using birth control. The document, which the Heritage Foundation published, says, quote, "We are pro-life and religious, and we are ministries, and we make the nation's capital our home." Oh boy, how fortunate for us here in D.C. The abortion opponents say, "We will not abandon the purpose of our organizations in order to comply with this law, and we will resist." Now, the right-wing organizations that linked their names to this document of theirs include the Alliance Defending Freedom, the Southern Baptist Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, Americans United for Life, March for Life, Concerned Women for America, and the Susan B. Anthony list. Now, during debates on the House floor, non-voting delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton pointed out that religious organizations in D.C. can hire whoever they want. Now, all this D.C. law does, now I want you to dig this, all the D.C. law does is stop employers from firing people if they or any of their family members use their private insurance, yes, their private health insurance, to subsidize reproductive health expenses such as birth control pills, other kinds of birth control. And 228 members of Congress, including 3 Democrats, I've got to be honest, including 3 Democrats, voted for this vicious madness to allow your boss to axe you. Now get this. It allows your boss to axe you even if your private insurance covers anyone in your family for contraception. Not just you. Anyone in your family. And they want this even though Congress has long made it a federal crime for D.C. to spend locally raised money on abortion services for low-income women. That's a settled issue. Congress has also prohibited D.C. from using local funds, dig this, for HIV prevention programs. And how long? For over a decade. Though its population, is greater, that is D.C.'s, greater than that of, say, Vermont or even Wyoming, Washington, D.C. has no voting representation in Congress. That's part of the problem here. Giving congressional representatives from other states the power to dictate local law in the District of Columbia. Talk about taxation without representation. See, look, I wish I had not been right about this, people. You must find out if your state legislatures are poised to give businesses who imagine they're fundy churches and not businesses the right to cashier you if any woman in your family uses her privately purchased health insurance for contraception. Now, listen, and listen well. These people would be comfier living in Iran. I'm going to say that again. I really think these people would be comfier living in Iran. Why? Because it really isn't the particular God that matters to these people, ayatollahs or right-wing ministers, so much as it's the worship of the religion of misogyny. So, continuing today, we are on the Starcom network. And you think on that. And while you think on that, I want to introduce to you a new writing colleague. He writes at OurSalon.com primarily. He's North Carolina's Patrick Frank. And he has a simple but feeling piece he calls Deep Concerns for My Country. Patrick says this: "I fear for America. My country's slipping into unremitting schism. We've escaped this fate for a long time, while other countries have had to live it for centuries. Too many are suppressed, rights gradually stripped. Who wants to worry about our cities in flames? Who wants to worry about voting rights abrogated through gerrymandering and excessive voter ID requirements? Intelligence and conscience must not turn a blind eye. Right-wing political extremism's growing in my country. We've religious extremism religious extremism, not just political, both in the form of Muslim extremism, resulting in terrorism, or Christian fundamental extremism, resulting in closed-mindedness and the demonization of anyone who does not fit the mold. Hell, I'd rather enjoy the World Series than be concerned about our growing political, racial schisms. I mean, these abrogation of rights, they were honored in our Bill of Rights. As a sane, responsible American with a conscience, I am one. I will not turn my back. I cannot refrain from pursuing nonviolent action to help preserve freedom and justice in my country. You see, the vast majority of us Americans are good-hearted people, genuinely caring. We do genuinely care for those experiencing personal, social, political hardship. Most Americans don't think of themselves as intrinsically better than members of another social group. Our admirable inclinations, they are undermined. They are undermined by the self-centered who care more about amassing wealth than making sure that other citizens have decent care, a job that will support a reasonable standard of living, freedom to pursue, even a creative life. We are retreating, and I fear sometimes, Patrick goes on to say, I fear sometimes we're slipping backward into a kind of neo-McCarthyism in which a significant number of Americans are denied even equal protection. That's the 14th Amendment, people. It'd be tragic were we to retreat to that era of excessive conformity, inequality of opportunity. And I'll just put in here, where would you go? You couldn't go to Starcom if we were all so excessively conformed? And here Patrick echoes what I tell you every week. We must, Patrick says, act as if everything we do matters. You know I tell you that at the close of every show. I believe in that way of living, Patrick says, with all of my heart. I refuse to sit on the sidelines while political and religious games are being played in my country. It's so injurious to so many. With the poem William Blake, I say this: I am involved with mankind. Now, switching it up a bit, HuffPo's Simon McCormick points out, and we've all been talking about Baltimore, but Simon McCormick in HuffPo points out that Baltimore's problems did not start with Freddie Gray. He says that chaos in the streets of Baltimore was decades in the making. Violence erupted that Monday after days of largely peaceful protests over the death of Freddie Gray, who died of injuries he sustained while in police custody. But Gray's death was not that unexpected. It was just the latest point on a timeline stretching back generations, encompassing all manner of racial inequity and human indignity. I mean, dig this, folks. On April 6, 1968, 2 days after the assassination of Dr. King, riots broke out in Baltimore. A day later, 3 were dead, 70 injured, 100 arrested, many buildings burned, destroyed, and the Maryland Crime Investigating Commission report later summed up the event in a few sentences. Quote, social and economic conditions in the looted areas constituted a clear pattern of severe disadvantage for Negroes compared with whites. Our investigation arrives at the clear conclusion that the riot in Baltimore must be attributed to 2 elements, racism and economic oppression. The decade following the riots, what happened then? It saw significant white flight from Baltimore as factory jobs in the Rust Belt city dried up. The city lost over 100,000 manufacturing jobs between 1950 and 95. As middle and working-class whites left Baltimore in droves, they left behind a shrunken tax base and a limping local economy. The middle class moved out. Longtime resident Mike Samoris, 74 years old, told the Boston Globe 5 years ago in 2010, between 70 and 80, the city's population itself dropped from just over 900,000 to under 800,000. In fact, it was just 787,000. By 2010, census data shows there were just 621,000 in Baltimore. As factory jobs, you see, moved overseas, most of the chances for employment that replaced them did not pay a living wage, and union protections were lost. As a 2012 Brookings Institution study, you see, found that jobs in low-paying industries like food service grew by more than 60% in Baltimore from 80 to 07, but jobs in high-wage industries, those industries that were farmed out, they grew by only 10%. Starting in the late 70s, drug kingpins began recruiting young kids and teenagers who, if caught, could usually escape the criminal justice system more easily and more cheaply than adults to aid with day-to-day business of selling illicit substances. And I want to put in here, look, guys, if you've seen The Wire, HBO's The Wire, you know that they weren't just making that stuff up. For many young people, the drug trade offered much more lucrative possibilities than the weak and outsourced local economy. Compounding these issues has been the subprime crisis of the past several years. Predatory lenders, primarily Wells Fargo, targeted black communities in Baltimore, relentlessly steering people, tricking people into untenable high-interest mortgages that would eventually what? It wiped out their wealth and left the city riddled with vacant and foreclosed homes, a damaged economy, high levels of crime, little opportunity to achieve something better. That was the context of Freddie Gray's life. In Sandtown, Winchester, his neighborhood, the unemployment rate, I want you to guess for a second. It's 20%, twice as high as the city's average. A third of the neighborhood families live in poverty, and more than half of its households earn less than $25K a year. The neighborhood is also plagued by a rate of lead paint violations, and you cannot lay that at the feet of the residents, 4 times as high as it is citywide. Lead paint is what? It's linked to a host of health problems and is, in fact, highly correlated everywhere with increased levels of crime. And bear in mind that Freddie Gray was not arrested because he'd committed a crime. In addition, residents of the neighborhood must contend with disproportionate levels of deadly violence. People who live in Sandtown, Winchester, and the adjacent Harlem Park neighborhood are more than twice as likely to be killed than residents of Baltimore overall, and hardly all due to civilian violence. The Baltimore Sun, their major newspaper, it notes that the government paid for the following legal costs, and this is just a small list, to cover officers accusing of misconduct. Recent pre-Freddie Gray victims include a 15-year-old boy doing no more than riding a dirt bike, where and how it's legal to do so, a 26-year-old pregnant accountant who had witnessed a beating, a 50-year-old woman selling church raffle tickets, a 65-year-old church deacon rolling a cigarette, and an 87-year-old grandma aiding her wounded grandson. Officers have battered so many non-criminal residents, resulting in what? According to hospital records themselves, broken bones, broken jaws, broken noses, broken arms, legs, ankles, head trauma, organ failure, and yes, death. All of this coming during, at best, questionable arrests. And remember, Freddie Gray's was not even questionable. It was ridiculous. And now listen, people. Listen to me. The neighborhoods all knew this long before Freddie Gray. Just because we may not have known it, those people living there knew it. Citizens were beaten while handcuffed. Others were thrown down, beaten to the pavement, faced with intractable poverty, jobs hurled overseas, high rates of deadly violence, a poisoned relationship between citizens and the cops. Is it surprising if many Baltimore residents feel like Pierre Thomas, who was a protester who told NPR News this week that official calls for peace only come when the powerful feel threatened? Thomas said this: where's the peace when we're getting shot? Where's the peace when we're getting laid out? Where's the peace when we're in the back of the ambulances? They don't want to call for peace then. Know when they want peace? When white people have to get out of bed, when cops have to wear riot gear, when the cops stop. Oh man, we got broken arms. We, the cops, got broken arms. Oh, then they want peace. Right now, You're with Jonathan Wolfman and Passionate Justice, embedded, part of the Starcom radio network. And now, to one of the most asked, wait for it, questions, gotta wait for it, among white people, given all of this. There's a Daily Kos writer who goes by the name of Antifa, and she has this very interesting answer, and she puts us back in November. It puts us back in November when Ferguson, Missouri is burning. She says this: I live several states east, but I've sat up all night watching, live streaming, rioting, Ferguson, Missouri. Grand jury's decision to whitewash and stonewall the murder of Mike Brown came out at 9 p.m. here. I think the first police car on fire came an hour later, and the night devolved into one store after another being looted and burned. It's quite something to watch image after image of flaming stores come rolling up on the screen, the amount of property destruction going on. Police are being remarkably restrained, and they were. They have the weapons to put the situation down real damn fast if that was their goal, but it isn't. They say they haven't fired a shot, a remarkable change of pace from the full clip execution of Mike Brown back on August 9. If they were to shoot anyone in the current riots, then they'd be the bad guys in today's news cycle, and that's where they plan to win this thing. In the news cycle. They want riots, I think, and they want to look like decent guys for a change, all for the news. Police behaving themselves puts all the criminal color onto the black community for carrying on. Riots are covered as yet one more historical example of black people getting mad and burning down their own neighborhoods, as in Watts, Detroit, way back then. Black residents burn down the places where they work every day, shop at every day, just senselessly wrecking the small businesses of their own communities, and there it is. The rhetorical question most whites ask: why burn down their own neighborhoods? And their only answer? Shake heads, shrug shoulders, never ever understand, can't ever come up with an answer aside from seeing it as reinforcement as to the black as craven savages slur, and with no answer, or with that, there is no need, no way to seek a solution they don't want, so let's be specific. While the stores being burned are mostly national chain stores, Walgreens, McDonald's, AutoZone, dollar stores, so on, they are locally owned branches or franchises in most cases. They are also some independent small businesses being torched, like the Ferguson Market and Liquor. These are the places that black residents of Ferguson shop, eat, and hopefully work at as well. And yet these shops went up. Roaring anger flames. Why do these stores attract such anger in direct action? Yeah, I know that it's probably only a few hundred, mostly young black men who are making their way store to store, pillage and burn. 20,000 other black residents protesting peacefully or at home, not destroying. They may be at home, but trust me, there's real satisfaction being felt across the entire community at the hitting back that's going on. It's widely seen as something well-deserved, long time coming. If this is what it takes to get some help for our community, some justice for what goes on around here, so be it. So why loot stores? Why burn them? You might have to grow up. You might have to grow up, a young black male in a city like Ferguson, to grasp why these stores are targets. Think, every day of your life, you've had to walk past these cathedrals of consumer culture, see things you don't have and can't get because you have no money, no real education. My teachers stink, and very little hope of ever being decently employed when over the past 50 years working-class jobs have been outsourced to keep labor cheap. Or you grew up seeing your mother, father, sister's brother hard behind the counter in one of these stores for minimum wage or less, part-time, so no benefits, bringing home a subsistence pittance. Maybe you've been behind the counter at Mickey D's yourself to bring home a few dollars, food, rent, dead-end jobs for dead-end, unwanted lives in the land of the free. You grew up tagging along with your mother, aunt, shopping these stores, using food stamps, coupons, buying only things on sale, putting up with the stares of the people around you who have real jobs, can afford to shop without government assistance, and when you go alone, because you don't want that government assistance, and you don't want this, when you go alone into one of these stores, you're immediately followed to see if you're going to steal. If you linger or look around at all, pretty soon some white cop will show up. Or maybe, perhaps worse, a black cop to take you outside and check you out to see what you're doing in the store, boy. I've heard that. This is typical. It wears on you, and it's bleak. Before you're 10 years old, you know in your bones you don't belong, that your life, your black life, is not valued. The America you read about in the papers, view on TV, it's not for you. It's never been yours. You come to see that it's there to feed on you. So the chain restaurant, chain drugstore is not my neighborhood store. It's instead the most visible symbol of the options and status you see every day as you go about in white America because you decided to be black. As a young black man, your future is statistically chronic unemployment. That's just the numbers. It's your odds. Could you overcome it? Sure, but you know that's the numbers. You know that's your odds. As a young black male, your future's to be stopped and frisked frequently for what? Walking while black, driving while black, staring while black. And being black in a white neighborhood, oh, God forbid that. Going to bed hungry was forced on you the same way dressing in hand-me-down clothes was, and so why burn down your own neighborhood? Are you getting a glimpse? Are you getting this glimpse? You loot because you don't care for these local businesses any more than they care about you. You burn them down to exact revenge. The few who do burn them down to exact revenge for not having a fair chance in the richest country, not just in the world, but in the history of mankind. It's not your local store. It's not your community. It's really not your country. That's how you feel. You may like that or not, but that's how they feel. Loyalty works both ways, and it doesn't work at all for most young black American males. Let's be clear. What's being burned down in our Fergusons are not the homes of black families. They're the consumer stores that feed off the black families of these neighborhoods. What's being methodically burned are the local businesses that pay taxes to hire the cops who stop and frisk young black men like you in Ferguson relentlessly around the clock, who take young black men to prison at 6 times the rate that they do white offenders for the same alleged crimes. Come on. Everybody downtown, y'all. This is a question because the answer is so obvious to a young black male. These stores are not in any sense my neighborhood, not in any sense that counts. The hatred and distrust you feel when you enter these places is palpable. You probably first felt the urge to hand some of that hatred back when you were still a boy. Little hope of changing your circumstances. Not in a country with real unemployment rate. The real unemployment rate for young black men like you, it's over 50%. You'd actually be better off with 40 raw acres and a mule out in Nebraska or Montana than try to pick up honest, odd jobs in rundown, segregated Ferguson, Missouri. But no. Why no? Well, Nebraska and Montana, they don't want you around any more than Ferguson merchants do. Oh yeah, they'll accept my money. Sure, but they won't help with the endless desperation, care enough to fix their damn lousy schools. They won't do a damn thing. nor let you into their suburban schools. Oh, God forbid combining those schools, 'cause it's not their problem. They won't do anything than board up their plate glass windows when yet another one of you is shot down in the street by some of the white cops sent to stop and frisk you. So there's your answer. You'd be burning these businesses down because first order of business is to get back, to get rid of your immediate oppressor. They aren't burning down the neighborhood. They're burning down the palaces of white consumer culture, shoved into their neighborhoods to suck away their money and labor while leaving them with nothing, certainly no future, dead on asphalt, 10 bullets. For what? For jaywalking. Shall we pretend? Shall we pretend it's justice, as the fathers of St. Louis do, as the governor of Missouri does, as the media seems to? Mike Brown was not an isolated death by cop in Ferguson, in St. Louis, in Missouri, in America happens every day. He was just one more dead black guy, just one more animal, as the Ferguson cops are known to have emailed each other. Michael is a national name. Why? Why is Michael... Why did he become a national name, Mike Brown? Because he just happened to be the one too many. And when justice was called for by the entire community of blacks and many, many whites, it was yet again harshly refused. And so, yes, it hit the fan. His murder was egregious. Police road rage. Let's call it what it is. Police road rage. They are out to protect commerce, the police and the government there, and private property above all else, above any black man for damn sure. So I'll ask you people, I will ask all of you out there, is fire the weapon of the hopeless? And as I ask you, I remind you to reach out to Passionate Justice and Starcom Radio Network on Facebook. Follow this show on Twitter at jwolf41387, the Starcom Radio Network. And now, I'll give you some more perspective on this. Because if you think riots have never caused change in America, see, we hear today so much, oh, if they just wouldn't riot, they'd be changed. Or why do they think riots, violence, will ever bring change? Well, I want to tell you something. If you think riots have never caused change in America, think again. Now, I've never been convinced that power shares itself without some struggle. The Nation magazine contributor, Ned Resikoff, tells us this. Shortly after the St. Louis grand jury decided not to indict, white police officer Darren Wilson, the President of the United States, Attorney General Eric Holder, they declared that justice would not be achieved by using anger at the Mike Brown decision. And, President Obama's desire to avoid the destruction, that's understandable, but the idea that the historical record shows that exclusively or even mainly nonviolent protest has driven social change in our country, dead wrong. In a number of cases, crises caused by riots and property destruction have had a significant role.
No justice! No justice!
Significant role in forcing authorities to respond to demands for political change. And dig this, even some of America's most iconic nonviolent movements included moments of destruction and chaos, not unlike what you've been seeing. Many of these people criticizing destructive behavior, Baltimore, Ferguson, They have cited the example of Dr. King and the 50s civil rights movement, the 60s movement, as the model of nonviolent, orderly resistance, peaceful demonstrations, sometimes in the face of of violent policing and provocation. And that was certainly a key feature of the civil rights era. Yet so too were outbreaks of violence in 65.
I mean, he deserved that many shots, though. Like, you can shoot somebody in their leg for stop them from running.
Do you remember where in 65? I'll tell you, in Watts, in L.A. Now, while Dr. King never advocated violent, destructive behavior, he did say this, that it would be morally irresponsible to condemn riots without at the same time condemning the intolerable conditions that exist in our society. And yet we seem to only condemn one side of it. He said this, King, the conditions are the things that cause individuals to feel that they've no other alternative than to engage in violent rebellions to get attention. And I must say tonight, King said in 68, not long before his own murder, I must say tonight that a riot is the language of the unheard. A riot is the language of the unheard. And that's not been the only time. The modern-day gay rights movement may have won many of its recent victories at the ballot box and in courthouses lately, but it was born out of an act of violent desperation when a 1969 raid in New York City in a gay bar. I know my New York friends, Ed Till will remember this. The Stonewall Inn, the raid, and those raids against gay people in well-known gay bars, they were routine, people. Not obviously just in New York City, in my home city, on Spruce Street in Philly, everywhere. They were routine gay bashings, but they were city-approved gay bashings. So at Stonewall in summer 69, the crowds just decided not to take it anymore and attacked back once. Its anniversary, June 28, is celebrated annually, as Gay Pride Day, and we don't talk about the violence of that day. We just don't. And, there was violence associated with the women's rights movement, along with the Seneca Falls movement, the birthplace of the movement for women's rights, and the civil rights marches in Selma. The battle for the 8-hour working day in the U.S. included such violent outbursts as the 1886 Haymarket riot. That's a long time ago, guys. While the key movement in the fight for labor's right to organize trade unions came when, at the 1921 Battle of Blair Mountain, when thousands of striking coal miners waged open warfare. I'm going to say that again. Miners in 1921, way back when everything was perfect. The Battle of Blair Mountain saw thousands of striking coal miners waging war on local enforcement and who else? The United States military, who had been sent in to put it the hell down. And food riots were also common throughout the U.S. during the Great Depression. That's in our parents' memory. And what's the point? History does not offer a definitive judgment on these acts of violence as non-productive. You can make arguments in both directions. Social movements, after all, are diffuse, they're complex, and the social and political change that emerges from moments of great upheaval can be attributed to many causes. You can rarely attribute them to any single cause. But once society has embraced changes driven by social movements, the more unpleasant and uncomfortable aspects of the history is often forgotten and put on the shelf. So look, I want you to avoid simplistic distinctions between legitimate movements and violent upheavals in the study of our history of protest driving social change in our country. The civil rights movement was a coalition. It was a coalition of thousands of efforts spanning decades. But what shaped the birthplace of all social movements in the United States was ultimately how the authorities responded to the grievances that brought the people out of their homes and onto the streets. Out of their homes and onto their streets. That's very important. Don't let anybody let you believe. No one should allow you to believe that social change in our nation has always worked as a result of orderly, peaceful, gentlemanly, gentlewomanly effort. That's only half the story. That's only half the story. Now, we move to our second excerpt from author Diana Finfrock Farah's terrific new novel, The Door of the Heart. We began this with you last week, and I'm going to read you a second excerpt right now. What a wonderful piece this is. As Tammy approached the table, she extended her hand before sitting down. Marcy, thank you for agreeing to meet with me like this. I can only imagine the courage it's taking to face me, of all people. Marcy smiled, nodded her appreciation of Tammy's sensitivity. I must admit that I was very surprised to hear from you. Their initial discomfort was considerable, each fumbling to find appropriate words. They'd been long-time acquaintances, but never friends, and it took a moment before Tammy could find her own courage to begin. She breathed deeply. And for that, for everything really, I'm so very sorry. Tammy looked into her latte for the right words. For whatever it's worth, I'm so sorry to have played a part in your family's pain. Before Marcy could find the words to register her surprise and this unexpected confession, she went on, I realize now that I remained silent when I needed to be involved, and my silence has allowed these terrible things to happen to Jamie at school. I should have put my foot down when I first heard the boys saying unkind things about him. So many people have been hurt. So many people have been hurt, most especially you and Jamie, but my family too, and others. Marcy, I'm simply heartbroken for Jamie and for you. Truthfully, I've never even thought much about gay issues because I didn't think they involved me, and I just didn't want to get embroiled in all the conflict that surrounds the whole thing these days. That was true on so many levels, but if she was making a confession, she needed to go all the way. Just saying that, I've realized I've never taken the time to educate myself about the issues, even to work out my own inner conflicts about homosexuality, for that matter. She looked deeply into Marcy's eyes, but now I know someone who's gay, and I see how they're hurting, and that makes all the difference. Just don't know what to do. Oh, but Tammy, you're doing it. You're taking the first step by coming here and risking conversation on the subject. You're being honest with me and with yourself, and it sounds like you're willing to listen with the possibility of changing your mind. See, people, I'm betting Diana's captured here the beginnings of so many conversations that many of you have had going on and continue to have in America, and you can see more about her novel at www.thedooroftheheart.com. And next week, our final excerpt. Now, I want to share with you this piece. You know, you've heard the expression, Kansas is flatter than a pancake. Well, it's true. Some years ago, a study was done at the University of Kansas, and yeah, it's flatter than a pancake, but when I tell you about this, you may think it's more about flat heads than topography. Kansas, because of its benighted Governor Sam Brownback and his 19th century literature and legislature, has no money with which to complete the school year. Now, Kansas is considering putting teachers in prison for assigning books prosecutors don't like, as the state Senate just passed a bill allowing prosecution of teachers who teach or share so-called harmful lit. The bill was proposed by Senator Mary Pilcher Cook, and it deletes a provision in current law that exempts school teachers from such prosecutions. Now, after introducing the bill earlier this month, Ms. Pilcher Cook took the Topeka Capital Journal in an interview, and she told them that it's in response to a poster that was displayed at Shawnee Mission Middle School in 2013. And the poster posed the question, how do people express sexual feeling? Media outlets, of course, pounced on the controversy, and some parents complained. But they have that poster because it's part of a broader sex ed curriculum, yes, and it emphasizes abstinence, but the school suspended use of all the material. Way to stand strong, you Kansas school admins. Missing links, one and all. See, look, I guess I was lucky. So no one ever censored any text I chose to teach, and I chose the texts I taught and never had an issue. And sure, I taught some banned books elsewhere. Catcher, Huck Finn, Merchant of Venice. Oh no, it isn't kind to my fellow Jews to teach Merchant of Venice. Yeah, well, better hide it from the kids. Even in the Jewish school I taught in, people, I taught that. And I taught the 1931 novel there, Michael Gold's socialist anthem about my people, poor Jews on the Lower East Side, Jews without money. I taught it in a Jewish private school, and so many more. In the Kansas City Star, you see reports that earlier State Rep Joseph Scapa of Wichita cited as pornographic books the legislature wants out of the schools and teachers slammed behind bars for using. And you know what those books include? They include books by Nobel Prize-winning author Toni Morrison. Someone has got to tell me what in hell Kansan Dorothy Gale was thinking when she asked the good witch, "Oh, I want to go home." Now, I want to wrap today, ladies and gentlemen, friends, on the Starcom radio and satellite network with a piece by our wonderful friend in Seattle, Washington, our friend Robin Sneed, writer and homeless advocate, newly in a home. And I've told you about how without a home for years, she finally got into a home. She calls this piece Communion, Kneeling on the Bayous. And I share this piece with you because you know as well as I do, we go out on the street and we see people who we are willing to bet any amount of money they are homeless, but rarely do we ask. And, you know, Robin's given us some insight on this in the past, but rarely do you and I have even time to ask, what's that person's backstory? Where did she come from? What happened to him? Well, I want to share a little piece of Robin's history with her permission. She calls this again Communion, Kneeling on the Bayous, and it was written 5 years ago, about 10 months before Robin became homeless. In the fall of '09, I was finally standing on the edge of the Mississippi Bayou. As a small child in California, it called to me. Couldn't tell you why. Saw something in school during a film, fell in love. Go there someday. Knew I'd stand right on the edge of creation and weep. Lost something there in another time, some piece of me, and I'd find it again. I kept that dream close 40 years. I met a man who said he could help, an angel. I almost thought I could see his wings. I was in trouble. I had lost everything to an American economy that had crumbled around me, terrified, wandering. I wanted to be elsewhere. Anywhere. I felt his feathers flutter around me, believed him. He said the magic words, "I've a place on the Mississippi Bayou. You really have to see it." Welling up, I asked myself, could this be happening after all the grief, all the loss, the rebuilding, the falling apart? Would I finally get to the water to find that piece of myself I'd lost? 7 years old? I simply said, trying not to cry, "I've dreamed of seeing the bayou since I was a child." He showed me pictures of his home in Mississippi, touched them longingly. "Let's go." "Where?" "Mississippi. Pack a bag. Let's go." I went, so desperate to be free from years of pain and struggle. I got into his car. We drove and drove past bright beaches, miles and miles of unspoiled surf, cried to myself. I put my head out the window, kissed the sun. We drove up to his house. It was on stilts because of the floods. I'd been there for 1,000 times. In my heart, I got out of the car, walked right out onto the edge of creation. I was in heaven, standing at the water of the Mississippi Bayou, made it, clapped my hands toward the sky. "Oh, magnificent you, whose name I don't know." The man brought me a chair. He was kind, charming, helpful. We sat outside, and I let the sight of the bayou pour itself into my soul. He pulled his wings down. They fell into a heap at my feet. "Were you abused growing up?" the man asked casually. I made a mistake, and the devil rose up. Some stuff went on. He had been an army psychologist. I didn't realize I'd opened the door to a room for him in which to dismantle me. The warm air was still. I changed the subject. "I can't believe I'm here. Thank you so much for this." So he was inside the room. "What position did your abuser have you in? How did he hold you? Did he make you strip?" The delivery was nearly fatal, hands shaking, struggling to form words, his face contorted. "I don't talk about that." I'd forced the words out. He asked another round of questions meant to systematically wear me down, graphic, horrible. I sat silent, looking over the bayou, looking for a piece of me, and then, "Time for dinner," his voice boomed. He stood up. "Where?" "Elks Club. There's a dance." I went. In a silent childhood, speechless days, I went. Halloween, people, magical costumes, Mardi Gras. They were so warm, jolly, talked to me. I was the shy child in the wonderland of another culture. A woman in a fairy costume sat next to me and asked if I wanted to dance. I said yes. I watched her whirl. I whirled around her, around and around. Gossamer wings seemed real. She laughed, held my hands. The man came onto the dance floor, said we had to go. I left with him, drove to his house. He yelled at me, told me I was disgusting, told me I liked being assaulted as a child, and now I was a pervert for having danced with a woman. He loomed over me, judge, jury. The demons of my life danced around his head. "We're leaving tonight," he bellowed. I ran out into the water. In the dark, I kneeled at the edge of creation, threw my tears at the delta. I reached my hands into the mud and wiped it on my jeans. I found that missing piece of me in the dirt, the terror, the silent room of a child who had been given over. I would get darker, and it would get darker after that, but not for long. The bayous returned. That piece of me had held it close and set me free. Oh, man, Robin Sneed of Seattle, homeless advocate, backstory. So think on your stories, ladies and gentlemen. Think. Follow the program on Twitter at jwolf41387. You have so much more. You have passionate justice embedded in the full range of diverse, poignant, compelling programming here at StarComRadioNetwork.com. Real feelings, real personalities. We broadcast real characters all the while. You keep trying to live as if justice matters, as if what you and your kids do, it matters. Be creative, courageous. Take your place on that great Mandela next to Bud Clayman, Patrick Frank, Diana Finfrock-Farah. and right next to me and right next to Robin Sneed, because it is our brief moment of time. You know, Phil Oakes, that poor tortured man Phil Oakes, said, "I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here." He was so right. Repair this crazy place. And you can, I promise, when you act on justice's behalf, it pays back. And it will most definitely make you happy. For our 80th show at 3 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time on the Starcom Radio Network. And do find and bookmark right now StarcomRadioNetwork.com and follow our show on Twitter at JWolf41387, because there and everywhere it's passionate justice.